I'm Alexis, and at the age of 29, I've finally realized my ambition of owning a Seattle apartment. I made a comfortable room that was all mine after years of arduous labor as a software developer. That is, until one evening, after returning from work, I discovered my sister Bianca dozing out on my bed. Her possessions were strewn all over my sacred area. Before I explain how I found out about my family's treachery and why I had to file a lawsuit, please press the subscribe button and let me know where you're viewing from. Have you ever had to confront relatives who have stepped over your limits? It was never easy growing up in my household. Bianca, my younger sister, was always the favorite, according to my parents, Harold and Margaret. My father was an accountant who brought his domineering personality home from work. Every penny I made from summer jobs or childcare was carefully examined. Bianca, on the other hand, was given huge allowances without inquiry. I was always reminded by my mother, a housewife with a gift for passive-aggressive remarks, that I had to assist Bianca since I was the elder sister. This assistance included anything from paying for her costs when she went over her allotment to sharing my clothes without my consent. When Bianca crashed her first automobile 3 months after receiving her license, I was already used to saving her by the time I was 17. My folks recommended that I gift her my dependable used Honda, which I had been saving for more than 2 years. The cold shoulder treatment I received for refusing continued for weeks. Bianca, who is currently 26 years old, has never grown up to be independent or responsible. She worked in retail for a while, leaving when the work got too demanding. She left community college twice, each time with my parents' justifications that the atmosphere wasn't supportive enough. In the meantime, they hardly gave me a hand when I received honors for my computer science degree. This trend persisted until maturity. An apartment would never last Bianca more than 6 months. She would either not pay the rent, break the conditions of the lease by attending parties, or argue with her housemates who wanted her to tidy up after herself. My folks would always run to her aid, settling debts with landlords or temporarily returning home. They also expected me to provide financial assistance, which I did, until I came to the realization that, like them, I was encouraging her conduct. I achieved my independence via hard work. I didn't get any financial aid for college as Bianca did. I had a full course load and worked 30 hours a week, frequently getting by on coffee and ramen. I was hired by a tech firm as an entry-level software developer after I graduated. Although it was a low wage, it was sufficient to rent an apartment in a less attractive area of the city with 3 roommates. I led a modest lifestyle for 4 years while taking on more freelance work and advancing my profession. I documented every cost in a comprehensive spreadsheet, packed meals, and missed vacations. My objective was clear in my mind. I wanted a home of my own where I could bring about the harmony and order that had been lacking throughout my early years. I finally signed the lease for my 1-bedroom apartment 8 months ago. It was mine, but it wasn't fancy. I spent my weekends looking for furnishings that reflected my personal taste at cheap stores and thrift stores. I invested in a high-quality mattress, painted the living room's accent wall a deep turquoise, and strung string lights around the windows. I made a space that represented who I was, not what other people thought I should be for the first time. I became more independent and set more defined limits with my family. Even those short trips left me emotionally spent, but once a week, Sunday dinners at their place seemed reasonable. When I lived alone rather than with roommates, my father would question me about my retirement plans and finances, implying that I was being careless. My mother would make remarks about how I looked, suggesting that my attention to my work was making me appear worn out and elderly. Bianca generally arrived late, if at all, before your time, but she was never reprimanded. The financial barrier was the most important one I set. I was surprised to see that I had granted Bianca more than $15,000 in loans throughout the years that were never paid back. I explicitly stated that she could no longer use my bank account for emergencies. This choice was criticized for being self-centered and unfaithful to the family. I went to the regular Sunday dinner 3 weeks before to the event that turned everything upside down. Halfway during the lunch, Bianca showed up. She was weeping and her eyes were swollen. In between her sobbing, she declared that her roommate was completely crazy about her late rent and that she was being evicted from her present apartment. My father cleared his throat and said that Bianca would be staying with them till she gets back on her feet after my parents exchanged heartfelt looks. They hadn't asked me to take her in, and I was relieved. In hindsight, I ought to have detected the calculating glances they shared. My mother's seemingly innocent inquiries concerning my job schedule and my upcoming trip should have caught my attention. When my father requested to borrow my keys for measurements and offered to help put some shelves in my apartment, I should have been suspicious, but I was too preoccupied with preserving the tenuous calm and safeguarding my newly acquired freedom to see the warning signals. I had no clue that the refuge I had so diligently built would soon be completely overrun as a result of my little gestures of trust. My entire life was upended on a Tuesday. The day began rather routinely. I got up at 6:30, had a fast jog around the neighborhood, bathed and boarded the bus to my job on the tech campus. I was totally focused on testing and debugging code since my team was in the last push before a significant product release. Mrs. Patel sent me a text message at around 2 in the afternoon. On the other side of the hall is my elderly neighbor. It looks like your sister is pleasant. Do you require assistance relocating the remainder of her belongings? She has a lot of boxes, I noted. I gazed at the letter, my bewilderment swiftly giving way to fear. My sister wasn't moving in. I didn't intend to modify my living situation with trembling hands because I was living alone. I texted Mrs. Patel back to seek for clarity, but she didn't reply. I hurried out of the building, said something about a home emergency, and phoned my supervisor right away. The 30-minute bus trip seemed to drag on for hours. The possibilities rushed through my thoughts. Had I been mistaken for another tenant by Mrs. Patel? Was my flat being broken into while posing as a moving company? Was there any way Bianca could have persuaded my landlord I shared a home with her? The knot in my gut became tighter by the minute, even though none of the scenarios made sense. There was nothing out of the ordinary in the foyer when I eventually made it to my apartment complex. It seemed like the elevator journey to the 4th floor would never end. There was no indication of any disruption when I got closer to my door. However, I discovered the door was already opened when I entered my key. My heart is racing. I opened it. I was met with an unreal scene. With the exception of a big pink bag resting against my bookcase and an unknown jacket draped over my well-chosen recliner, the living room appeared almost unchanged. I walked around the room in startled stillness. I no longer saw myself as really my. Tactic magnets displaying takeaway menus were affixed to the refrigerator door in the kitchen. Wine coolers and leftovers from fast food had taken the place of my meticulously arranged meal prep containers. Even bad was the restroom. The whole counter was covered in makeup. My toiletries were pushed into a corner, strange towels were hanging from the rack, and a pair of wet leggings was thrown over the shower curtain rod. But in the bedroom, there stretched out over my bed in a tangle of my beloved linens was the real violation waiting for me. With an eye mask pressed up against her forehead, Bianca's lips was wide, and she was snoring quietly. She appeared totally at home, as though this invasion were the most normal thing ever. A tiny bedside table that had not been there before was placed next to the bed. I held a framed picture of her with friends, a glass of water, and her phone. The terrible insight struck me suddenly. My keys had been copied by someone. This was not a passing visit or miscommunication. This was a planned invasion of my privacy. I was physically sick. Without me, my sanctuary became a scene of violation. With a harsh voice that broke through her quiet sleep, I exclaimed, "Bianca! Come on, Bianca, get up." Before realizing, she squinted up at me in bewilderment as she slowly stirred. She stretched opulently across my memory foam mattress and yawned. "You arrive home early. I assumed that on Tuesdays you worked until 6 o'clock. I was somewhat stunned by her tone, which suggested that her presence in my bedroom was quite natural. My voice was a strained whisper when I finally found it. "Why are you here?" "You entered my apartment, but..." "How?" Pushing her matted hair away from her face, Bianca sat up. "It would be okay according to Mom and Dad. They assisted me with moving some items in yesterday, and the remaining items today." She made an ambiguous motion toward the living room. "Most of my belongings are pressed up against the wall. Thus, they don't stand in your way." "It would be okay according to Mom and Dad." I repeated my astonishment, turning to rage. "I live in this flat. They are unable to authorize you or anybody else to move in." I was being too theatrical, and Bianca rolled her eyes. "You know they have keys. During your business trip to Portland last month, you requested them to water your plants and they produced copies. The parts came together with a click. During my 3-day excursion, I did in fact entrust my parents with a key, expecting them to return it upon my return. They had given back a key, but not before creating illegal copies for themselves, and now obviously for Bianca. You must go." I spoke forcefully despite my inward trembling. "Now pack your belongings. This is against the law. You can't remain here." Bianca seems truly taken aback by my response. Avoid being absurd. I could remain as long as I needed to, according to my parents. "You have all of this room to yourself," they remarked, "and family supports family." Back on the cushions, she collapsed. "In addition, I have previously changed my address with my job and all of that. Everything has been resolved. Your address has been updated." I was afraid I was going to hyperventilate. "Nothing has been resolved. I pay for this house that I live in. I won't let you move in without my consent. Well, she responded decisively, I can't leave now. Everything I own is here. I also relinquished my other location. I mean, you wouldn't abandon your own sister, would you? She posed this question as though it were the most irrational thing in the world. Her phony innocence caused her eyes to widen. I stood there mulling over my alternatives. I could physically attempt to take her away along with her possessions, but Bianca had always been adept at making the situation into a theatrical play in which she was the victim. An unreasonable part of me still wanted to settle things inside the family, even though I could contact the police right now. Maybe my parents had just gone too far. I have to contact Mom and Dad without understanding how serious what they're doing is. I murmured as I eventually left the bedroom to gather my thoughts. Keep it low, okay? Whatever Bianca called after me, they'll tell you the same thing and I'm now napping. The day I spent relocating the living room was quite draining. I saw further information about the invasion. My coffee table is already stained purple from a nail polish bottle, Bianca's laptop on my desk, and her shoes strewn by the entrance. The area I had meticulously designed to serve as my haven now felt alien and unfriendly. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and dialed my parents, hoping that this was all a huge misunderstanding. On the fourth ring, my father picked up his voice informal, as though it were just another weekday call. Alexis, is everything okay? I struggled to keep my voice level as I said, no, everything is not all right. Bianca moved into my apartment without my consent when I recently returned home. She claimed she was given the keys and told she could live here by you and her mother. In the background, I could hear my mother's voice asking what was wrong during a brief pause. The way my father responded chilled me to the bone. Naturally, we assisted her with her move. Family supports family. While your sister was homeless, Alexis, you had the entire apartment to yourself. How were we to proceed? Ask me. Don't steal my keys. Instead, respect my property and personal space. Fueled by mounting wrath, the words poured forth. My father laughed and said, Don't be so dramatic. We are not breaking in as strangers. Your parents are us. And at this time, Bianca needs a steady atmosphere. There is more than enough space in that flat for you two. The point is not that. I pay for this house that I live in. You didn't have the right to move her in without first talking to me. My mother's voice took on the pained tone she used when she played the victim as she entered the line. This is how you pay us back for everything we've done for you, by ignoring your sister while she is in need of you. Alexis, we brought you up better than this. Your actions are unlawful, I demanded. Please come retrieve Bianca and all she has today. Not at all. My dad gave a bark. She is not moving. You'll just need to handle this like an adult and find a solution. You will assist your sister in getting back on her feet if you have any concern for this family. And what's the estimated time for that, I insisted. A week, a month, forever. For however long is required. My mom stepped in. This self-centeredness of yours is really ugly, Alexis. The same would be true for your sister. That was a lie and we both knew it. Never once has Bianca done anything for me that didn't end up helping her more. I stopped the call without reaching a settlement after 10 more minutes of pointless arguments, guilt trips, and flimsy threats of being cut off from the family. I basically had an unwelcome roommate who had been granted license by my parents to disregard whatever limits I would try to set because they wouldn't come remove Bianca or her possessions. It hurt like hell the first night. I attempted to reason with Bianca once more when my parents declined to step in, stating that although I saw her need for assistance, it was unacceptable for her to move in without my permission. She said that everything was already over and that I should relax, hardly taking her eyes off her phone. She had already rearranged my closet to make place for her stuff when I went back to my bedroom to collect my thoughts. I pushed my neatly arranged work clothes into a little space. I had half emptied the drawers of my dresser. My belongings were mixed up to make room for hers. At around 7, Bianca took over the living room, surfing through social media and cranking up the TV to watch reality shows. She recommended that I use the kitchen table or something when I explained that I typically worked on my laptop there in the evenings. The meal prep stuff I had made for my lunches that week was subsequently consumed by her, remarking that it was better than nothing, yet quite boring. She had unexpectedly invited 2 friends over by 9:30, and the 3 of them were chatting loudly and preparing drinks in my kitchen. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "It's just a couple of friends," in response to my objection. Refrain from being such a buzzkill. I went to my bedroom, but the cacophony made it hard to sleep. I came out about midnight to see pizza boxes, empty wine bottles, and the lingering scent of cigarettes. Bianca and her pals had gone to a club without bothering to clean up or even lock the door properly, even though my flat had a stringent no-smoking policy. I contacted my closest friend Zoe before work the following morning, bleary-eyed from sleep deprivation. She declared, "This is completely crazy." After I gave the circumstances, this is breaking and entering, don't you know that? And your parents made it possible. You may accuse my own family members. My gut tightened at the prospect. They didn't respect it even though I was furious. You belong to the family, Zoe pointed out when they did this. My relative is a lawyer, you see. You must at the absolute least replace your locks right away and document everything. I confided in Jordan, a co-worker at work who had previously talked about having to cope with a roommate that pushed boundaries. As I explained the scenario, his eyes grew wide. According to him, that is a direct invasion of a house, not merely a matter of pushing boundaries. Since that is precisely what occurred here, you must handle this as if it were a crime. I looked up Washington State's rules on unauthorized entrance and tenant rights during my lunch break. My assumptions were validated by what I found. If an unauthorized renter was found residing in the apartment, my landlord may remove me for breaking the law by making duplicate keys, entering without authorization, and relocating someone without the leaseholder's approval. That night when I got home, I tried to set some ground rules with Bianca. In my writing, I made it clear that there would be no visitors, that I would not ask, that I would keep the common areas tidy for hours after 10, that I would not use my personal belongings without permission, and that I would help with food and utilities. She took one look at the list, chuckled, and let it fall to the ground. She acknowledged, yeah, I am not really a rules person, before going back to her video conversation with her pal. She utilized my pricey skincare items that evening, leaving the caps off to allow them to dry out. Her laptop charger was in a box someplace, so she took mine. Before my alarm even sounded, she used all the hot water for a lengthy shower at 6 in the morning. Every infraction was greeted with an eye roll or a nonchalant shrug. When I made the observation, I had reached my breaking point on the third day. I said that if needed, I could contribute with the security deposit and offered to help Bianca locate a home of her own. Given how lovely this apartment is, why would I want my own? She answered. Additionally, Mom and Dad stated that since I am officially a resident, you cannot expel me. It doesn't operate that way. I tried to remain calm as I explained. The lease does not apply to you. You are not authorized by law to be here. You're simply being tough, and I should stay put, regardless of what Mom and Dad say. You will ultimately move past it, they claimed. She completely ignored me and returned to her phone. I set a due date for her. I have 3 days to plan and vacate, or else I'll have to take more drastic measures. She snorted in my face. How will you respond, sister? You have to call the police yourself. Mom and Dad would be destroyed by that. You would never treat the family that way. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect was her assurance in her role and my reluctance to genuinely defend myself. She was correct that in the past, whenever my family pressed me, I usually gave in. But this time, she made a huge mistake. This had nothing to do with coercing me into paying her share of the restaurant bill or taking a sweater without asking. This was my house, my haven, and the tangible result of all my independence and hard work. And I was determined to fight back against them taking it away. The following week was dedicated to increasing the number of infractions. There was further proof every day that Bianca didn't intend to respect my personal property or space. She was wearing my nicest outfit, which I had been saving for a significant client meeting when I got home from work on Monday. It looks better on me anyway. She shrugged when I approached her. There was now a little wine stain on the sleeve of the garment. On Tuesday, I went to the kitchen for breakfast and found a stranger sleeping on my couch. Later, Bianca clarified that he was only a friend in need of a place to stay. 2 further unidentified visitors used my shower and ate the items on Wednesday. By Thursday, I had just made a buy. I discovered that neither my grandmother's gold necklace nor the $60 in emergency cash I had stashed on my desk were in my jewelry box. Bianca pretended not to know when asked about these things. You could have misplaced them. Lately, you have been somewhat disorganized. I had no evidence that she had taken anything, but I was furious at her gaslighting. Just the eerie awareness that things were constantly vanishing. I was no longer able to afford the luxury of sleep. Bianca had parties that lasted until 2 or 3 in the morning. The cacophony, the continual presence of strangers, and the gradual breakdown of my personal boundaries left me fatigued and more desperate than ever, even though I kept reminding myself that I had to be up at 6 for work. On Friday night, I was thinking of paying for a hotel room with money I didn't have in order to sleep. My parents unexpectedly arrived. Rather than knocking or making an announcement, my mother hurried in with shopping bags. As if this was a scheduled family visit rather than another transgression of boundaries, she continued happily, "We thought we would check in on our girls. I brought the cookies you enjoyed as a kid, Alexis, plus some groceries." My father trailed following her, looking around the flat, critically, right away. "This place needs a man's touch," he said, shoving my thoughtfully placed floor lamp into a corner where it was useless. Have you thought of purchasing a larger TV for two? This one seems insufficient. My blood ran cold at the nonchalant assumption that Bianca was now here to stay. Bianca came out of my bedroom and enthusiastically greeted our parents before I could reply. I was going to give you a call, she said. There isn't much closet space here. Perhaps we might turn a portion of the living room into a space for my clothing, I thought. That's a really good concept. As she eyed the bookcase containing my treasured collection of novels and technical manuals, my mother nodded. In any case, Alexis seldom utilizes this area. Always at the gym or at work. They carried on talking about my flat as if I hadn't even been there, as if it were a shared family home that was up for remodeling. My father gave me the severe expression he had used to quell criticism throughout my youth when I eventually succeeded in interrupting, pointing out that any alterations would require my consent as the leaseholder. Family helps family. He continued in a tone that left no space for disagreement, Alexis. You have plenty of room here and your sister needs stability right now. Indeed, a cunning expression crossed his face as he looked about. Bianca should get the bedroom as she has more items that you could use with the couch bed we could purchase for the living room. I gaped at him in shock. Do you want me to give up the bedroom in my paid apartment? My mother, who had already moved my beautiful pillows without my consent, said, Don't be selfish. Your sister's recent breakup and employment circumstances have caused her to go through a lot. Making her comfortable is the very least you could do. Over the course of their 2 agonizing hours, they kept moving my furniture, critiquing my decor decisions, and planning Bianca's final setup. They discussed putting up more shelves, putting a vanity in place of my desk for Bianca, and even painting the walls the color she wanted. They never once acknowledged that I had any voice in these choices or that this was my place. I sat in startled silence as Bianca excitedly described her ideas for our flat, after they eventually left, vowing to return on Sunday with materials for the makeover. I was struck down by the situation's actuality. This was no short-term encroachment. They had no intention of respecting my rights or sentiments and planned to occupy my area permanently. The following morning was the last straw. I needed to set up my home office with the external monitor and professional backdrop I had meticulously planned for a crucial virtual meeting with customers. When I got up early to get ready, I saw that my home office had been completely disassembled the previous night. Someone had shoved my desk up against the wall. After unplugging the monitor, shifted to the ground. My desk was a makeshift vanity with Bianca's vast beauty collection strewn all over it, and my neatly arranged work documents were all over the place, some of them stained with coffee. Her laundry was now piled up on my desk chair. My office, what happened to it? Bianca was quietly brewing coffee in the kitchen when I made my demand. She shrugged and said, I needed the desk space for my makeup. You have the option of working from your kitchen table, or even better, going to your real workplace. Isn't that the purpose of offices? In half an hour I have a client meeting. I have to get set up. Panic increasing. I was almost yelling now, figuring out how fast I could put everything back together. She poured coffee into my favorite mug and added, Not my problem. Perhaps you ought to have brought it up sooner. I was trying desperately to reconnect my equipment when I realized that my business laptop had also been transferred. While looking for misplaced wires, I haphazardly stuffed important documents into a drawer. Something I discovered completely stopped me cold. A folder with my tax returns leasing agreement and personal banking records which I stored in a secured file box. The contents had been rifled through the lock after it had been forced open. Why are my private financial records public? With trembling palms, I held out the folder and asked. At least Bianca had the grace to appear briefly uneasy. Mom and Dad needed to know something. It had to do with include me in the lease or whatever. You were added to the lease without my consent. I felt as though the room was spinning around me. Bianca, that is fraud. That is outright fraud. Don't be too theatrical. Dad explained that because I currently reside here, it is really a formality. She dismissed it with a wave. Anyway, I'm leaving. I hope your meeting or whatever it is goes well. She left me standing there with the ramifications of what she had just said beginning to seep in, surrounded by the mayhem she had caused. Bianca's breach of my personal space wasn't only something my parents were encouraging. They could have compromised my lease and rental history in the course of aggressively attempting to prove her legal right to stay there. I shut myself in the restroom. Even there, Bianca's possessions crowded every available space, making it the only area that still provided any privacy. I eventually gave in to my tears while sitting on the bathtub's edge. My whole body trembled as the tears fell in loud, forceful sobs. This was much more than a rude house guest or a family going too far. My independence, my personal space, and my legal status as a renter were all targeted in this well-planned assault. The tears faded and were replaced with a chilly clarity. It wouldn't be possible to reason. There could be no compromise. My family has demonstrated that they didn't respect my rights, my space, or myself. If they were prepared to perhaps perpetrate fraud in order to get Bianca's place in my flat, what else they may do was impossible to predict. I dialed Arthur Reeves, my landlord, with shaking fingers. I carefully explained the problem to him when he responded. I made it clear that I had not consented to anyone living with me or being added to the lease. My greatest concerns were validated by his reaction. Someone claiming to be your father called me yesterday. Arthur's voice was full of anxiety. He asked if it would be possible to add another renter to your lease. He assured me that it wouldn't be an issue when I indicated that we would need your signature and consent. Alexis, this is really alarming. Unauthorized tenants are against the conditions of your contract and may face eviction. The last straw for me was the possibility of losing my residence due to my family's behavior. This was no longer a family conflict that could be resolved amicably and amicably. This was a legal issue that needed to be resolved quickly. I appreciate you informing me. I'll take care of this right now, I told Arthur. Please do not accept any documents pertaining to my lease unless they are personally signed by me. I sat for a long time after hanging up the phone, thinking about the seriousness of what I was about to do. Then, feeling more determined than ever, I called again this time to a tenant rights lawyer whose details I had stored in my research earlier in the week. Even much it hurt, the way forward was obvious. My family would now have to deal with the fallout from their actions because they pushed my hand. No more haggling, no more compromising. If necessary, it was time to use the legal system to regain my freedom and my space. Eleanor Winters, the lawyer I phoned, agreed to see me that afternoon. Claiming a family emergency which was not far from the truth, I rescheduled my client meeting. I was a ball of nerves when I arrived at her downtown office, still wondering if suing my own family was too drastic. Eleanor, a shrewd, well-featured woman in her 50s with gentle eyes behind chic spectacles, listened carefully as I explained everything, taking notes or seeking clarification on occasion. She put down her pen and gave me a stern look when I was done. Your family's actions amount to several legal infractions. Unauthorized key duplication, unlawful entrance trespassing, and even identity theft, she added bluntly. These are serious offenses, Alexis, considering the attempted lease fraud and the access to your bank records. Your legal rights have been gravely violated. With clinical accuracy, she described my alternatives. I might start a civil lawsuit for damages, press criminal charges for the unauthorized entrance, and possible fraud, or seek a restraining order against all 3 family members. The prerequisites and effects of each path varied. Securing your residence is your top priority, Eleanor suggested. Naturally, you must get your landlord's approval before changing the locks today. You should also keep a record of everything. Take pictures of your apartment's present condition and any damage. Keep any emails or texts that show they were aware they were acting against your wishes. If your building has security cameras, ask for footage of the moment Bianca's possessions were carried in. I nodded with an unusual mixture of sadness and approval. Having a lawyer verify that my family's acts were not just cruel but illegal was both consoling and terrible. I still harbored the notion that I was exaggerating and that there would be a straightforward fix that spared my sister and dad from facing legal repercussions. What about Bianca's argument that since she is now a resident, she cannot be removed, I inquired. Recalling her certain declaration, in order to establish occupancy, Eleanor vigorously shook her head in Washington state. You, as the real leaseholder, must enter into an agreement. Without your permission, your parents are not allowed to establish a tenancy on your behalf. You have every right to have Bianca removed as a trespasser because she has only been there briefly and hasn't established lawful residency through the appropriate processes. With Elena's card in my pocket and a well-defined plan of action, I departed from her office. I called Arthur first, gave him the rundown, and asked for his permission to replace the locks right now. Being understanding, he immediately consented and even offered to speed the procedure by arranging for the locksmith personally. Considering the situation. I then combed through my phone and took screenshots of all the pertinent texts, including Bianca's nonchalant admission that our parents had illegally copied my keys. I requested surveillance video from the days Bianca's stuff were brought in by getting in touch with the building management. A locksmith had already completed installing the new deadbolt by the time I got back to my flat. Additionally, Arthur had a maintenance guy set up a basic security camera above my entrance oriented to record anyone coming in or going out. I methodically took pictures of each room inside to record how my possessions were moved, the destruction of several objects, and the general occupying of my area. I made a list of the damaged or missing objects, including the cash jewelry and soiled clothes. I've run out of my pricey skincare items. Despite the physical protection precautions in place, the work papers were soiled by coffee. I got in touch with building security and gave them pictures of my parents and Bianca, stating that they were never permitted to enter my flat. Security was to notify me right away and if required the police if they tried to do so. The hardest part was probably the last preparation. As instructed by Eleanor, I reported the unlawful entry, trespassing, and duplicate keys to the police. Even after I clarified that I was reporting my own family members, the officer who took my testimony remained impartial and professional. He informed me that, regrettably, we see this type of stuff more frequently than you might imagine. Property and boundary issues inside the family can get complex. Whether handling it through the appropriate legal processes is the right thing to do. I waited after making all the necessary preparations. Bianca had spent the entire day out, probably with the intention of coming back to the flat whenever she felt like it. My parents had discussed dropping over on Sunday with their renovation materials just like she had been doing. I was as prepared as I could be for the inevitable encounter. My phone rang at around midnight and it was a call from building security. "Your sister is trying to enter your apartment, Miss Reynolds, but her key isn't working. She's getting really upset. Do you want to come down and talk to her or do you want us to send her away?" "Ask her to wait in the lobby, please," I said. "I'll be down soon and I'll have cops with me." As instructed by Eleanor, I had made arrangements for police to be there throughout this altercation. When I arrived in the lobby, an enraged Bianca was pacing back and forth with her phone glued to her ear. "How have you altered the locks?" When she spotted me, she made a demand. "I've spent the last 20 minutes attempting to get in. Like some sort of guest, I had to summon security." "Bianca." My voice was more steady than I felt as I spoke. "You have been residing in my flat without my consent, which is why these authorities are here. You and our parents produced illegal duplicates of my keys, which is why the locks have been changed." Her expression wavered between anger and disbelief. "You reported me to the police, your own sister. Are you crazy? I never gave me permission for you to live there. The legitimate renter." As Eleanor had said, I kept trying to keep to the facts. "You must get your things and depart. I'm not leaving." She turned to the policeman and growled, "I also live in this flat. I presently reside here." The senior officer took a step forward. "Ma'am, are you bound by this apartment's lease?" "No, but this was arranged with her by my parents." "Consult them." She made frantic gestures with her phone. "They are currently en route." The phone call made sense then. My parents' automobile screamed into the apartment parking lot within 15 minutes. My father's face was crimson with anger as they hurried in. "My mom is crying already. What does this signify?" Speaking to the cops instead of me, my father yelled, "You're bothering my girls, but why?" The problem was gently conveyed by the cops. The residence was legally occupied by me alone. Bianca was living there without my consent, and it was illegal for her to duplicate the keys. With an expression I had seen numerous times before, a combination of hurt and manipulation, my mother turned to face me. "How could you harm your family in this way? You have broken the law after everything we have done for you." I answered, astonished at my own poise. "My keys were copied by you without my consent. Tried to add Bianca to my lease without my permission, after moving her in without my permission. We were assisting your sister." My dad yelled, "Families do that. They support one another. I want you to quiet down, sir." One of the policemen issued a warning. "Our goal is to help find a peaceful settlement. Alexis, your daughter, has reported unauthorized entry and trespassing to the police. She is legally entitled to choose who resides in her flat." "This is absurd," my dad sneered. "We're not intruders. Her parents are us." The officer calmly clarified that family members are not exempt from the law. Entry without authorization is still prohibited. "Come on in." With my parents, the talk went back and forth between guilt trips, threats, and efforts to downplay their behavior. Throughout, the police remained professional and continuously explained the situation's legal facts. Bianca accused me of treachery and heartlessness, alternating between sobbing pleadings and furious screams. At last, the cops recommended that we go upstairs to get Bianca's possessions. Because this conversation was not suitable in the lobby, I objected, but my parents insisted on going with us. The cops nodded, but threatened to remove them from the building if they continued to act aggressively. The situation rapidly worsened after I was inside my flat. With fresh rage, my father turned on me after noticing the new locks and the security camera. "After everything we have given up for you, you believe you can shut out your own family. I asked you to keep your cool, sir." He was reminded by the police. My mom started to frantically collect Bianca's belongings, putting up a display of my difficulty and unreasonableness. "It's unbelievable that you would abandon your own sister." Ignoring that, Bianca might easily go back to their house, she sobbed. As Bianca stormed about the apartment, she randomly grabbed things, including a few of my belongings. She scoffed when I brought this up. Think of it as compensation for my mental anguish. The cops stepped in and made sure she gave my belongings back. The flat felt oppressively tense. I had to fit years of dysfunctional family relationships into a little living area. I filed a police report and my father found it on my kitchen counter. That was the tipping point. He grabbed it, skimmed it over, and stepped forward to me. Anger twists his features. You accused us of being your own parents. You selfish, ungrateful kid. His finger pricked the air only inches from my face as he stepped closer to me. Immediately, one of the cops moved in between us. I need you to back off immediately, sir. Rather than obey, my father continued to yell charges at me while attempting to push by the officer. Calm down, the cop said, grabbing his arm. In reaction, my dad tried to pry himself free, accidentally hitting the police while doing so. The events that followed appeared to occur slowly. My father was swiftly restrained by the cops, who also told him that he was being arrested for attacking a police officer. The second cop stopped my mother as she yelled and ran toward them. Bianca obeyed after witnessing our parents being restrained. She lost control and screamed in anger as she lunged at me. Before being dragged away by an officer, she was able to scratch my cheek. To the expanding list of infractions, another assault charge is added. All three of my family members were in handcuffs and were given their rights in my living room in a matter of minutes. My dad kept yelling accusations and threats. My mother sobbed uncontrollably, pleading with the cops to realize that everything was a misunderstanding. As they were escorted out my flat, Bianca would alternate between crying and insulting me. In startled stillness, I stood. As my family was brought into police custody, I watched with a stinging cheek from Bianca's scratch. I didn't think the confrontation would end like this. I had hoped they would comprehend limits and the gravity of their behavior. Maybe even to say sorry. Rather, they had been arrested because they were unable to take accountability or adhere to the law. When they were gone, the apartment became quiet. The lack of chaos was nearly as confusing as its existence had been. I collapsed into my couch, engulfed by the chaos of the altercation. I had recovered my space and maintained my ground, feeling both triumphant and heartbroken. But at what price? Even if my family ties were damaged, they might never fully recover from this. However, there was a little developing sensation of relief behind the doubt and guilt. I had, for the first time in my adult life, established clear limits with my family and upheld them in the face of their coercion and pressure. My flat was once again mine when the locks were changed and the security camera was installed. Even if it hurt, the win was nonetheless achieved. The days after the arrests were a haze of court cases, desperate phone calls, and emotional upheaval. The next day, my parents and Bianca were freed on bond, and within hours of their release, court dates were scheduled for the many counts they were facing. Not just from them, but also from other members of my extended family who had been given a substantially manipulated version of what happened. My phone started to ring with calls and texts. I had to change my phone number because the harassment got so bad, and now I only give it to my lawyer, my job, and close friends. Despite taking this precaution, I still receive messages via email, social media, and even notes dropped at the front desk of my place of employment. My family members who had never been close to me turned against me completely because of the story my parents propagated, which portrayed me as mentally ill, ungrateful, and harsh. Every year around the holidays, aunts I saw phoned to say they were disappointed. I received harsh comments about family devotion from cousins I used to play with as a kid. Being portrayed as the antagonist in my own tale was nearly too much to stomach. I took a week-long emergency leave of absence from work, in part to cope with the legal fallout, and in part because I was unable to concentrate with everything going on around me. My supervisor, who was sympathetic but worried, gave me permission to take the time off with the stipulation that I would have to make up the project deadlines when I returned. Being by myself in my flat for several days was both therapeutic and challenging. I reorganized, cleaned, and reclaimed my area for hours. Deeper wounds remained open, but Bianca's scrape on my cheek healed. For the reparation claim, I meticulously recorded what was irreparably destroyed, cleaned away coffee stains, and corrected what could be mended. I should schedule a meeting with Arthur, Eleanor said. My landlord attested to the security of my lease, but considering the circumstances, he suggested taking more precautions. I could use my phone to see who was at my door thanks to the peephole camera he put. An unanticipated act of compassion that made me cry with appreciation. The legal proceedings proceeded with meticulous accuracy. Almost instantly, a temporary restraining order was issued, prohibiting my parents and Bianca from approaching me, my house, or my place of employment within 100 feet. 3 weeks later, the permanent order court date was scheduled, allowing both parties to get ready. Eleanor received a settlement offer from the pricey lawyer my parents had hired. They would cover my apartment's damages. The inference was obvious if I withdrew the restraining order and the accusations. As they had done so many times before for Bianca, they were still attempting to exert control over the situation and buy their way out of the repercussions. Eleanor suggested that the restraining order be rejected. "Legally protects you," she said. "Nothing stops them from doing something similar in the absence of it. Additionally, you cannot drop the criminal charges. Based on their behavior against the police officers, the state is pursuing them. I saw my family for the first time since the evening of their arrest when we went to court for the restraining order hearing. In some way, the formal atmosphere where he had no power made my father appear smaller than he usually was. In order to give the impression that she was a kind mom who had been wronged, my mother had dressed properly." From the other side of the courtroom, Bianca stared at me, her animosity evident even from a distance. I was almost taken aback by the chutzpah of their lawyer's argument. "I had invited Bianca to remain with me during a family dinner," he said. "Then for no apparent reason, I changed my mind and surrounded them with cops." He asserted that my parents had just been attempting to assist both of their daughters by arranging a living situation that would be advantageous to us both, and that I was mentally unwell and maybe experiencing paranoid delusions. Eleanor meticulously delivered the evidence when it was my turn. The surveillance footage of my parents and Bianca bringing her belongings in while I was obviously at work, as well as the texts. Mrs. Patel's evidence regarding discussions in which Bianca acknowledged her parents had planned the move-in without my knowledge, as well as the locksmith's documents regarding the illegal key duplication. After hearing both sides, the judge, a severe lady in her 60s, spoke. Her decision was clear-cut. After a year, the restraining order would become permanent, and I may ask for a renewal if needed. She also mandated that my parents replace the lock, install a security camera, and make up for the lost and damaged goods. She concluded by saying that while family ties are significant, they do not outweigh a person's right to privacy and security in their own home. The court cannot tolerate the behaviors performed here, which demonstrate a troubling disrespect for human autonomy and limits. Without glancing at me, my parents walked out of the courtroom. Their stifled rage made their features stiff. Bianca gave me one more angry look before trailing behind them. It was similar to cutting a tie, painful yet essential. It's similar to excising a tumor that has been growing for years. A similar tendency was seen in the criminal trials. While Bianca suffered more severe repercussions due to her assault accusation and prior history of minor infractions, my parents were given probation and community service for their crimes. She received a sentence that included 30 days in jail, a year of probation, and required anger management therapy. The responses from extended relatives remained conflicted during this time. With the exception of blindly accepting their version of events, the majority stayed solidly on my parents' side. Surprising exceptions did exist, though. My mother's younger sister, Aunt Sarah, came through with unanticipated help. She informed me over coffee at a neutral place far from my flat that your mother has always been domineering. When I was in college, Mother did the same thing to me. Mother showed up to my dorm with boxes and said she had decided I should move back home since living in a dorm was too distracting. Then I caved. You have my admiration for sticking to your principles. I gained knowledge about my family from Sarah. I was unaware of my parents' financial difficulties. They were cautious to hide the fact that they had borrowed money from other family members beneath a facade of stability and prosperity. They would constantly make up stories about short-term failures and how, months before they targeted my flat, they had been putting pressure on family members to take Bianca in. They had no intention of continuing to help her. Sarah clarified. However, they also didn't want to be the villains that expelled her. It seemed to them that you were the ideal answer. Housing and most likely financial help would be provided by you. They could tell everyone about Bianca's lovely example of sisterly love while she was away from their home. Yes, it was. This insight changed the way I perceived what had transpired. Although control and boundary violations were undoubtedly important, they had not been the only ones. Additionally, it had been a premeditated maneuver to shift the responsibility for Bianca from themselves to me without having to acknowledge that they no longer wanted to support her. Although the information did not completely make the agony go away, it did help me put their actions in perspective. It was more than just me. It had to do with behavioral habits that had persisted in my family for many generations. Even while these disclosures provided clarity, there was a significant emotional cost. I started experiencing bad dreams about returning home to see my place occupied by strangers. Even though I knew rationally that I was secure, I added more locks and security measures. I continuously examined my security camera and panicked at sudden noises. Zoe persuaded me to see a therapist during a particularly difficult week during which I hardly slept. "This is trauma," she said firmly. "You need professional support to process it." Dr. Lynn, a compassionate therapist specializing in family issues, helped me understand that my reactions were normal. responses to having my safe space violated. We worked on coping mechanisms for the anxiety and techniques for processing the complex grief of family estranged. "You did not cause this situation," she reminded me. "In one particularly difficult session, when I was questioning if I had overreacted, did you set a reasonable boundary? And they violated it repeatedly and egregiously. Taking legal action was not just justified, it was necessary for your well-being and safety." Slowly, over weeks and then months, I began to rebuild my sense of security. The legal matters settled into the background, the restraining order doing its job of keeping my family at a distance. I focused on work on rebuilding friendships that had been neglected during the crisis and on reclaiming my joy in the independence I had worked so hard to achieve. The apartment that had felt tainted by invasion gradually became mine again. Each new decoration or rearrangement, a small act of reclamation I painted over the walls where Bianca had carelessly left marks, replaced the bedding she had used, and reorganized every space that had been disturbed. It was healing this physical restoration paralleling my emotional recovery. And through it all, I carried the hard-earned knowledge that sometimes love means setting firm boundaries, especially when those boundaries are with the people who should have taught you to have them in the first place. 6 months after the court hearings, my apartment truly felt like mine again. The new security system gave me peace of mind. I had not thought possible in the early days after the invasion. A smart doorbell with video recording Windows sensors, and the knowledge that my landlord had explicitly banned my family members from the building, all contributed to a growing sense of safety. Work became a place of social loss and achievement, rather than just escape. I threw myself into projects with renewed focus, my performance earning me a promotion to senior software engineer, along with a significant salary increase. The financial security further solidified my independence, creating an even stronger foundation that could not be easily shaken by family manipulation. My social circle transformed as well. Some friends had drifted away during the crisis, uncomfortable with the family drama or unsure how to support me. Others stepped up in ways I never expected, becoming a chosen family that respected boundaries as naturally as breathing. Zoe and Jordan from work, my neighbor Mrs. Patel, who began inviting me for weekly tea, and new friends from a coding meetup group, all formed a support network built on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt through Aunt Sarah. I occasionally received updates about my family. My parents had told everyone they were giving me space to work through my issues, recasting their court-ordered distance as a generous parental decision. They never acknowledged any wrongdoing, at least not publicly. But Sarah noticed they had become more cautious about making demands of other family members, perhaps finally understanding there could be consequences for overstepping. The most unexpected development came 8 months after the arrests. When I received a letter forwarded through Elena's office, the handwriting on the envelope was Bianca's, and I nearly discarded it unread. After sitting with it for a day, curiosity won out. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter from a rehabilitation facility in Oregon. Bianca explained that after serving her jail time, she had enrolled in a residential program for addiction issues, problems our parents had hidden from the extended family for years. She wrote about using alcohol and later prescription drugs to cope with our parents' suffocating expectations and her own feelings of inadequacy. "Compared to me, I was always the screw-up," she wrote. "And you were always the one who had it together. Mom and Dad made it clear I would never measure up to you, but then turned around and acted like you owed me because you were successful. It was easier to believe them to think you had some obligation to take care of me than to face the fact that I needed to take responsibility for myself." The letter contained no direct apology for the apartment invasion, but acknowledged that her behavior had been inexcusable and driven by addiction and entitlement. She did not ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, only sharing that she was working on understanding her role in the family dynamics and learning to function independently. I had mixed feelings about this unexpected communication. Part of me was skeptical, having seen Bianca manipulate situations with apparent sincerity many times before. Another part felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps she was genuinely seeking change. I decided not to respond immediately, giving myself time to process this new information, with Dr. Lin's help. "You do not owe her a response," Dr. Lin reminded me. "And if you do choose to respond someday, it should be on your terms, when you feel ready and secure in your boundaries." I tucked the letter away, neither rejecting it completely nor rushing to rebuild a bridge that had been so thoroughly burned. It was enough to know it existed. A potential opening for a different kind of relationship in the future, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and resentment. My own healing progressed steadily, if not always in a straight line. There were still difficult days when guilt would creep in, when cultural expectations about family loyalty would clash with my need for healthy boundaries. The first Thanksgiving after the estrangement was particularly hard. Social media filled with family gatherings, while I celebrated quietly with friends, but Even those difficult moments became opportunities for growth as I learned to honor my feelings without being controlled by them. Perhaps the most significant change was in how I viewed relationships of all kinds. I became more discerning about who I allowed into my life, recognizing red flags I might have previously ignored. I learned to articulate my boundaries clearly and without apology, no longer fearing that setting limits would lead to abandonment. This newfound clarity extended to dating as well. After a year of focusing on my own healing, I began seeing someone who demonstrated respect for my space and independence from the first date. Alex, a software developer I met at a conference, understood the importance of boundaries in a way my family never had. When I eventually shared the full story of what had happened, his response was supportive without being pitying angry on my behalf, without trying to take over my narrative. "Your apartment is your sanctuary," he said simply. "I would never expect access to it without your explicit invitation, each and every time." Those words, so basic yet so profound in their respect for my autonomy, confirmed I was on the right path, learning to recognize healthy relationships and walking away from those that were not. As the one-year anniversary of the apartment invasion approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. The restraining order remained in place, renewed at my request, and granted without challenge from my family. My apartment, once a site of violation and conflict, had transformed back into a haven now filled with new memories and a stronger sense of ownership. The professional boundaries I established at work led to greater respect from colleagues and management. The personal boundaries I maintained with friends created deeper, more authentic connections, and the internal boundaries I developed in therapy helped me separate my own values and needs from the expectations others tried to impose. I came to understand that protecting yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Setting boundaries is not cruel. It is an act of self-respect, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members with unhealthy patterns is to refuse to participate in them, even when that refusal comes at a high emotional cost. The apartment that once felt tainted by their invasion now feels more like home than ever, because I finally realized I deserve to protect what is mine, and no one, not even family, has the right to take that away. Have you ever had to take a stand against family members who violated your boundaries? Let me know in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with similar situations. Remember, you deserve respect and security in your own space. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to protect your own boundaries, whatever they may be.